Welcome to the Productivity Podcast. Delighted today to be joined by Joe Dodds, who's the founder and owner of Counterpoint Matters. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Simon. Great to be here. Thanks for asking me to join in.
No, you're more than welcome. So today we're going to be talking about engagement and productivity, and Joe's been doing some reflection on things that she sees as important in these areas based over current times and looking towards the future. But before we jump into any detail, Joe, it'd be good for you to tell us about who you are and what you do and where you've come from.
Yeah, lovely. So I've got a quite eclectic background and quite an eclectic business now. So my original background was retail HR. I worked for people like B&Q and Staples and Safeway back in the day. And then 15 years ago, I started my own business and I've done various things. I had a publishing business. I taught people how to set up WordPress websites. I taught social media strategy when that first came out. And then in 2012, I started also working with the Engage for Success movement and focusing some of my work, my corporate work, particularly on employee engagement, knowing that social media and digital tools within organizations for engaging and collaborating and communicating was sort of the next big thing, if you like. And so now I do employee engagement stuff with organizations. I work within Engage for Success as a volunteer, and I'm also co-strategy director. And just to say, that's the national movement around employee engagement, spreading the word and shining a light on good practice. And I also work with my other business, Power to Live More, with home-based coaches and consultants on being successful and getting to live more. And that's about getting to do more of what you want to do and less of the stuff that you don't want to do. And my interest is around that in terms of personal productivity and well-being as well. And then I do various other things that I won't even go into. So I've got quite a busy business life, but one that's quite difficult to explain at times. So hopefully enough information and background and interest to have an interesting conversation about engagement and productivity.
Awesome. Yeah, so you're busy. I like the helping people to use WordPress. I've got to know the back end of our WordPress site well, and it's not the easiest thing in the world to get your head around, I have to say.
Yeah, and it's way easier now than it used to be. When I started, we didn't have all the nice front end sort of management process of it, which makes some of the stuff quite easy. It used to be quite technical, so that was quite interesting and a bit of a learning curve. But yeah, it's still a good platform to use, I'd say.
I know, no, I totally agree. And the flexibility is amazing and the visuals that you can get out the other end. But yeah, it's been a good learning journey. I've enjoyed it. It's frustrated me. I've found that the simple things to do are difficult to do, and the difficult things to do are simple to do. That's my appraisal of using of WordPress. So I know more than I did anyway, which is cool. So you've been doing some reflection in preparation for catching up today around employee engagement and productivity. Mm-hmm. And the first thing that you kind of flagged was about treating people as individuals.
Yes.
So before we look at maybe how things change in the future and how we look after ourselves and others, it'd be interesting just for you to explain why that was your kind of primary start point.
Firstly, when I work with people around employee engagement, one of what we call the 4 enablers within Engage for Success is engaging managers, having managers who engage their people. And one of the parts of that is about treating people as individuals. And we've talked for many years about bringing your whole self to work and people being sort of accepted for who they are. And clearly there's a massive discussion, even in recent weeks around, inclusion, diversity, and so on. And it's something that we've talked about all the time, but it's not, I don't think, completely landed in organisations as much as it has in recent weeks, because we're seeing into people's homes, aren't we? We're having calls and we're actually looking at people's offices or their dining rooms or their kitchens or whatever, and we're getting to know people much better than we have done in the past. But also in this environment that we've been in, people are in so many different situations. I'm in I would say, a privileged position. I've got a reasonably big house, a garden. There's only 3 of us that live here. Fine. But some people are living in, high-rise flats with no gardens. They've got 4 children under 6. They're homeschooling. There's so many pressures that we're all under. And so it's just so important, even more than ever, to really treat people as individuals and know that, you might have a team of people and half of them are sort of, bumbling along reasonably okay with the situation. And half of them, or just one of them, might have just the most horrendous situation that they're trying to deal with, as well as, getting on with the work and trying to be a productive member of your team.
Yeah, so some interesting points there, Joe, and just to circle back on a couple. We've done a series of podcasts now, and it has been a consistent theme where people have talked about this wearing a mask at work for a long time and then realising that they were trying to be someone they weren't, almost behaving in a way that they assumed people wanted them to behave, or they thought their line manager or line manager wanted them to be. So that's really interesting because it's not the first time somebody's mentioned this.
And as I say, it is something that we've been talking about, that bring your whole self to work is sort of a mantra that has been talked about, on conference stages and, in organizations and so on. And I think we didn't always really understand what that meant or know what to do about it. And, the situation we're in, it's just, we've had to just get our heads around it because it's in people's faces now, if you like, which has been, I think, really interesting. But, when we're talking to people about coming back to work or about what they are doing, even if they're still working from home and all that sort of stuff, we just need to be aware that what works for us and what's good for us isn't necessarily the same for everybody. So, my husband's working from home and has been for the last 3 months. I think it's great for him. I think it's giving him so much more flexibility and it's great for his well-being. I think he'll tell you he hates every minute of it. And so I'm reflecting I love working from home. And I've done it for 15 years, and I'm looking at him thinking he looks, more relaxed and he's got more flexibility. And I'm saying that's a good thing. In his head, that doesn't feel like a good thing. So even just in that little micro example, maybe it isn't the right thing for him because he needs to go out and talk to people, and he's not very good at just sort of having conversations online like I would do. That's not his thing. So he really misses that community sort of feel of just being in the office with other people, even if he wouldn't necessarily consider them to be, friends or whatever. So we just need to keep remembering that, again, we put our own sort of filter on how things are and make the assumption that how we see things is how other people see them, and it, of course, isn't.
Looking to the lens of somebody else's house is always interesting as well. So we're finding out more about people we maybe worked with for years when we look at their bookcase, which is organised alphabetically or by size or by colour or by a random series of events. So you can tell a lot, and it's interesting. I think people have found out more about people they've worked with. Look in some of those Zoom meetings, it brings up a load of questions that you'd never have kind of had that conversation. Yeah. So I think there's lots of finding out more about non-work related things, which has been a benefit from all of this stuff. And it's always intrigues me of when you do a video call where people position themselves. What's behind? Do they think about it? Don't they think about it? There's all those horrendous ones online where all sorts of things have happened behind people that they've not known about. Exactly. Kids barging in.
Exactly. I had a funny scenario with my mother-in-law who lives next door, so we've been shielding with her basically. And she had her first Zoom call sort of 2 or 3 weeks into lockdown with her book club, and she came to me the next day and she said, I'm a bit worried about security, because obviously she'd seen all the news about Zoom and so on. I was like, I don't think you need to worry about your book club in Folkestone. It'll be fine. But then she was like, when they were telling me I had the lamp growing out of my head and I'd needed to try and work out how I could do it so I didn't get a double chin. And it's like, I know, welcome to my world.
Well, the best one I've seen recently was a business that's booming is where you can rent a llama to randomly appear in your Zoom meeting for up to 10 minutes. And apparently they're inundated with requests, which is just blows my mind.
Brilliant. I've got to go and find that one. I think the other thing to just bear in mind as well when we're talking about people being individuals is the whole fight, flight, freeze sort of response to this stuff as well. When we're thinking about how we respond, they talk about fight or flight, you either get angry or you run away sort of thing. People rarely talk about the freeze element of that sort of whole thing that's going on in your brain that you can't control. And I think that is where we misunderstand people as well, that if people aren't being sort of vocal about something or they're not, as I say, sort of running away from it, the other option is that they're just stuck and they can't do anything different and they're, I don't know, almost zombie-like potentially. There's a third option there that we don't always understand or notice, and we sort of sometimes misread that as people being, not productive or not participating or whatever. And actually, some of this stuff could just be going on behind the scenes for people, and we just don't realise it because they're different to us and how we cope with these scenarios.
Yeah, so really understanding where people are and where they're coming from, and I suppose walking a mile in their shoes will really help, won't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Should we use this as an opportunity to do things differently moving forward? There's always these plans or evolutions of things. This feels to me like it's one of those revolutionary events where there's a real opportunity to people talking about pivoting and doing things radically different. So what's your view on kind of doing things differently moving forward?
Yeah, well, I've just done a podcast sort of discussion actually with a couple of colleagues, and we were talking about the positives that have come out of the last 3 months for us, and the sort of macro level that I talked about was feeling like it's almost like I couldn't remember the grammatical term. I think it's a semicolon was what I was going for in the world, that it has forced us to stop and think, and that's globally, that's not just individually or in your family or in your local environment or in your business or in your country. It's the whole world has had to reassess and think, what do we do next? And I just hope that we take that opportunity at all levels to do that, and it doesn't just go back to normal. I mentioned my husband, his company already have decided that they're not going to open all of their offices in future. They will be getting them to work from home for a big proportion of their time. Quite radical for them, but they have decided to do that because of the sort of experiences that they've had, and obviously the strategies that they're thinking about. People like Twitter have said that it's up to them when they open their offices so that they're available for people, but they've actually said it's up to their people when or if even those people come back to the offices. So they've actually said, moving forwards, some people might never come back. They might decide to work from home, for the rest of their career with Twitter. So that, companies like that are really thinking about doing things differently. And then there's others you hear about where they're just desperate to get people back into their office, to go back to how it was before. And, I don't think the world is ever going to be how it was before, really. And to assume that it is and try and, replicate what was, I think is, it's not very enlightened and all those other things. But actually, I think it will be damaging for some organizations because it just won't work. So, yeah, I think great opportunity to do things differently, and each of us needs to think about what that looks like for ourselves.
For me, there's challenges that we probably haven't consciously even considered yet. So the whole Twitter thing, I admire. It's a brilliant statement. I'll be really interested in 6, 12, 18 months to see how that plays out, because you can't, with distance, you can't replicate that getting in a room with people.
No.
There is that whole reading someone's body language, physically being in the same room as people and making sure everybody is focused, or you've got all the social stuff that goes on behind the scenes there.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see how they manage those, or if they put in ad hoc events to physically bring people to locations, because we could just move some social issues and psychological issues somewhere else. You don't know in a flexible world when people start working and work. I personally, when I'm working from home, probably do a lot more work because I find it more difficult to switch off than I do if I'm in an office. And that's just me personally. I'm sure some people find it difficult to switch on rather than switch off. There may be a whole bunch of stuff that we've just not consciously had to think about yet, or don't even understand, that is driven by some of these new ways of working and flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which will be interesting to see how it comes through, because we kind of don't know what we don't know.
No, and that's a debate that we keep having in our house, because as I say, my husband doesn't really want to be working from home and will be, and is currently, and sort of quoting, he was talking the other day about, when we have an agile thing, in IT, maybe that meeting, that planning meeting will need to be face to face. And of course, I was quoting people like the company that owns Todoist and various other tech companies who have always been global, and they've got people around the world. And they, like you say, they meet once or twice a year for a week where they build relationships, I guess, better than they have done in the past and all that sort of stuff. But other than that, they do all work remotely. They do agile, they have these daily stand-ups and all that sort of stuff, but they're doing that from their individual houses. So I keep saying, well, people have done it and do it, and it does work. But I think because we're still in sort of crisis mode, we're not working from home in a real normal situation. It is real, but it's not normal. Where it's almost like we're making it up as we go along, and we're not looking at the best examples of where it does work, because we haven't got the bandwidth to do that at the moment. We're having to make do with the best we can do in the circumstances. So it'd be interesting to see, whether people do really dig in and look at what does work and has worked elsewhere already to, take the learnings from that and do things to get over some of those issues, or whether it'll just be, in the too hard box and we will go back to normal in lots of cases.
And I think this time's shown us that if you've got the will and you can cut out some of the red tape, you can get stuff done that has been on your to-do list for ages in the too hard box. Examples of, companies spinning up click and collect or home delivery in 2 days.
Yeah.
It shows that it's not through the knowledge of people and through the will or the skill of people. It's through potentially all the senior levels that need to have a decision or a say in it. And when you take that out of the way, because like you say, you're in more panic or reactive mode, it gets done. From a productivity point of view, certain businesses and individuals have probably been the most productive they've ever been because of the whole, how do I get it to work? What do I need to do to make it safe? And then all the constantly shifting legislation and criteria that's around it for all the right reasons, adapted quickly. And because it's so quick, you can't almost worry about if things go wrong. You've got to fix it and move on. So that whole cycle of, in certain cultures in organisations, if you get it wrong, it's more of a witch hunt rather than we've learned from it, let's not do it again, seems to have disappeared for this period.
Yeah, I was going to say, the challenge will be, how do you stop that happening moving forwards? Because, this is, as you say, it's sort of crisis mode. It's because we have to. It'd be interesting as things settle down to see whether that stuff naturally does come back in, because you can't keep operating on sort of adrenaline and needing to have done it yesterday. We know that people will crash, people will burn out, there'll be those issues. So in the process of stopping all of that urgency, will it end up, as you say, going back to sort of witch hunts and 5 levels of sign off on things because we can again? It's interesting to think, isn't it?
Yeah, I hope not. I hope there's a happy medium of getting stuff done, learning from taking the positives out of things that don't work and then moving on to the next thing. So try 10, 5 work brilliant, 5 don't, learn from it, move on to the next 10. I think that's all relative to culture is my view. I think the culture drives that and the senior leadership.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And some of the variables as well will be the companies that survive are the ones that have had to do that and have done it and done that well. And so building on that shouldn't be so sort of unusual to be thinking about doing, because clearly it worked. And where it hasn't worked, I guess those companies won't be around anymore anyway. So will we have a whole raft of more agile companies because they're the ones that have survived, sort of thing?
I hope so. As a consumer, as a customer, that only makes it better, because you'll see innovation, you'll see product, you'll see all sorts of stuff that hopefully keeps you interested in buying come to the forefront. So I'd vote for that.
Yep, me too.
I'd vote for that. And within that, your kind of final consideration that you've noted down was about being kind to ourselves and each other. So again, it'd be interesting to hear your build on that.
Yeah. So I think that, that goes back to the treating people as individuals piece. As I've said already, that, the working from home, the working in this environment thing has been, it's not just working from home, it's working from home during a crisis. So, it's been a very specific type of environment to have been in. Expectations for people have been lowered, I guess, because of that. I think we need to keep thinking about that as we come out of this, and it's not looking like it's going to be a quick come out anyway, does it? So making sure that we look after ourselves and we ensure other people are looking after themselves. And going back to what you're saying about what will companies like Twitter end up like in the future, will they come up against issues and change the policy and so on? Part of the whole thing about sort of being kind to ourselves and other people is so that we have got the time to sort of recover, if you like, to come out of this, to do things differently. But going back to the treating people as individuals, making sure that that's everyone covered, because it's easier in an office environment where you can see everyone and you can see Peter in the corners looking not good, looks a bit scruffy, looks quite sort of down and perhaps is losing weight or whatever, you can see that more easily in a real environment than you can in the online world. And I do wonder whether we've got quite high expectations of people to get through this process, and whether we just need to be extra aware of, those individuals that wouldn't obviously come forward and tell us that there's an issue. How do we find that out? So a real, well-being is what is top of the agenda for so many companies through this period. And I think, that individual piece in with that as well is so key. But I just think for individuals as well, for ourselves, you've said, I know that when I work from home, I don't stop. So, it's about you knowing that and trying to work out strategies to stop yourself rather than just letting it happen, because it's not sustainable in the long term, is that?
No, absolutely. And you find ways around it, don't you? So for me, it's kind of walking the dog. So if I'm hooked to my laptop, I have to physically get out of the house. Otherwise, I'll get kind of this tractor beam drawn back in, or go and do some cooking or something. So it's getting out of the room, I suppose, and understanding that potentially my timelines or pressures aren't necessarily anybody else's. So yeah, it's a real learning curve, isn't it, in terms of how all that fits together and what it looks like in the future. Mm. And I think because all the media and all the focus is on the here and now, and we're talking in short-term weeks about what things will happen. Yeah, I'm conscious that, again, 6, 12, 18 months down the line, we may see different symptoms and side effects of people recovering from some of the situations they've been in, which nobody's really talking about at the moment. It's all when for short-termism, socially, economically, all those different buckets you want to put it in. There could be some real challenges that lie ahead that, again, we've just not consciously had to think about because it feels too far away. Everything's just short-term.
Yes, no, I agree. I was reflecting the other day that in our environment, we've got a 13-year-old daughter who has a ton of activities. I'm in various choirs. My husband's a sailor. We normally have a really hectic calendar. And of course, none of that is happening at the moment, but I'm still working a lot. And obviously my husband's still working from home. It feels like I haven't got very much time, even though all of those things that we normally do, driving Ellie around and all that sort of stuff is all gone. And I was reflecting, thinking, as this changes and these things start to happen, am I going to be saying, oh, I don't think I'll go back to that. Oh, I don't think I'll do that because I haven't really got time. And I'm thinking, well, I had time before and I should have lots of time, but it doesn't feel like I have. And so I was wondering, some people are just desperate. My husband is desperate to go sailing. He will definitely be back out sailing as soon as he can. I'm sort of almost sitting there thinking, oh, will I ever leave the house again? Which is not healthy, is it?
No. I'm the same, actually. There's some, we were talking about the other day, there's some stuff that you don't miss. Yeah, consciously, some of it I couldn't even name. I probably don't miss it. There's some stuff you really miss. So for me, it's football. Clearly, like everybody, seeing family and friends, and coaching. I do some football coaching, so coaching the kids and the team, because you've grown up with them, they've grown up with you. It's a really good bond and interaction. Nice to get out, especially at this time of year. There's other stuff. Actually, walking down the high street, I've not actually missed it, if I'm really honest, because I can get it all online. It's nice to go for a browse and a wander around on a nice day, but have I really, really ever sat there and thought, I wish I was walking down the high street now? Probably not. Travelling's a big one, which again we kind of touched on, so it'd be interesting to see where that comes back to.
Yeah.
So
I think the travel thing's really interesting. We were talking the other day about, public transport and needing to wear masks and that sort of thing. And I just kept going, well, we're not going on public transport, are we? And to be fair, it's sort of trains and planes, I suppose, that we would ordinarily use. And I can't see me flying anywhere for the next, I don't know how long. Trains, I go a lot on business on trains. I can't see myself wanting to do that at all for a very long time. And in which case it needs to be online. And that's probably possible. So, some of those things we can say no to, but I suppose at some stage there will be that, that $1 million question. I think I was telling you before we started about a colleague who'd been talking to somebody about doing a project, and they were going to do it in sort of partnership. And she said, oh, I'll need to get you a mask. And she's going, what? She said, oh, because we're going to meet the chief executive in their garden and talk about this. And it's a global company they were talking about working with. And she was a bit unsure. And then she said, oh, we'll need you to fly to America for 2 weeks. And then she was really unsure, but she really wanted to do the work. So she went away to think about it. And she spent a good couple of days sort of agonizing. And in the end, went back and said, look, I'll do anything you like online through Zoom and everything else. But, in the foreseeable future, I'm not going to be traveling to another country, least of all America probably. And, I don't even want to go and do the sitting in the garden thing. We can do it through technology. And the woman just went, yeah, okay. And my friend was a bit like, well, why did I spend all these days worrying about it when apparently it wasn't a deal breaker anyway? And yet the person had just started the conversation like they would have done 6 months ago, assuming that this was, going to happen. And it wasn't a problem in the end. So, I wonder how much of this will get back to normal because people just will think we have to do it and people will say yes, even though they don't want to. And then some of these things will just continue because nobody's sort of put their hand up and said, actually, I don't want to do this anymore.
We use lots of hotels for our analysts and ourselves when we're away, and that's probably my biggest thing at the moment is travel can kind of get my head around. Hotels is a whole different ball game, especially in terms of hygiene and cleanliness. We'll see. There's going to have to be some sense of doing things like that because the world will stop turning to a degree depending on what job you do. But really interesting to see how it pans out.
And it's that decider between I could, but I don't have to. I could, but I don't want to. And it'll be interesting to see, where those bits meet and you have to then make a decision to do something. I think, and like we said, everyone will be doing this differently and individually, and there'll be expectations that don't fit with your own perspectives and how we navigate our way into whatever this new normal will look like on an individual basis is going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah, I agree. And all the stuff we don't even consciously consider at the moment, the stuff that will catch us out, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been fascinating to chat, Jo. I've really enjoyed that and I think some really good points for people to reflect on. If people want to get in touch with you to have a further conversation, where's the best place for them to find you?
counterwhatmatters.com. I don't give that one out too often. I don't even know what it is. I think it's a .com, but just Google Jo Dodds and you'll find me.
And you're on LinkedIn as well, if not.
Exactly.
Yeah, perfect. So final question for everybody that comes on is, what's the best bit of business advice you've ever been given?
I was on a podcast recently and had sort of reflected on this and thought it doesn't show me in a good light. But one of my team many years ago said to me that if I spent as much time doing my work as I did organising myself and did it in such a good way, then I'd be even better. As in, I'm really good at organising myself, but it's a really good way of procrastinating and not actually doing any of the work. And she was my subordinate, and that did pull me up quite short. And I have remembered that ever since. And she's still a good friend, and I do value the fact that she made that point to me. So yeah, I need to, or everyone needs to spend time doing things that are really important rather than planning to work out what those important things are.
It's feedback's a gift, and clearly you took it on board, which is good. Yeah, you can spend a lot of time making the plans look pretty and everything around it, can't you? It's then the actual physically getting on and doing it. Brilliant. Well, it's been a pleasure to catch up. Really appreciate you coming on, Jo.
Thanks for inviting me, Simon. Thank you.